You're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. I'm your host, Shane Darby. In this episode, we're going to take a look at the history of the County Sligo Golf Club with Tony Cunningham, who is a long-standing member of the club with a keen interest and knowledge of the history since its founding in 1894. He joins us for a chat about the origins of the club, some of its founding fathers, the development of the links, the beginnings of the West of Ireland Championship, and indeed some stories about some of the multiple winners to lift the trophy. Tony was very kind with his time when I was at the club recently. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Many thanks for tuning in. Tony Cunningham, how are you?
That's right. I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us some time today, and
no problem.
To try and learn a little bit more about the history of County Sligo Golf Club.
Fine.
So, I believe, and thank you for your time recently, I believe there's some story in terms of the origin story with regard to the Sligo Militia. What can you tell us about the founding fathers from 1894?
From 1894, the Connacht Rangers and the Sligo Militia had a camp on the headland of Beaumore, down beside the beach. There were 8 cannons on that hill. Sadly, there's none of them today. 3 of them are still survive, 1 in Strand Hill and 2 at a house of what the place called Grange North in Sligo. It was a man that had bought these 2 cannons. There were 2 other cannons, very large cannons, that lasted until the 1950s. And unfortunately, for some reason, they were taken away and scrapped. There was 3 regiments in Ireland: the Sligo Artillery, the Connacht Rangers, and the Clare Regiment. And they were the only artillery regiments in Ireland. And they even the Clare Regiment came here to Sligo, and they were all on the hill, as we call it, Beaumore Point. And they used to practice shooting at the sea. But as WBC, we think it was WBA said, there was one battle they could never win against the waves. But there's a number of areas on the course that named after the Connacht Rangers. Now, Colonel Campbell was in Sligo. He was a businessman in Sligo.
That's Colonel James Campbell.
James Campbell. And he was a part of the Sligo Militia. And we reckon that before 1894, that he and some of the army officers used to play golf. And in that time, and the reason I say this is because the Clare Regiment came here they told me 1902, and it definitely wasn't 1902. It had to be before 1894, was because they camped up there on the first fairway. There was 3 holes crossing that after 1894, so it definitely was before that time.
Okay.
And he was, as I say, a businessman in here in Sligo. He got a George Coombe to come here, and he designed the first 9 holes here.
And Coombe, of course, has connections with Royal County Down. He's connections with Royal County Down, I believe.
That's right. He was connection with Royal County Down. He was secretary there for many years. He was a fine golfer, and he was also the first secretary of the Golfing Union of Ireland. He designed the holes in conjunction with Colonel Campbell, and Colonel Campbell brought some of the people that work for him out here to build the greens and that. Now, the first 9 holes were up on the plateau here. The first hole, the first tee was opposite the hotel down there, because this clubhouse wasn't here, and up to in front of the watch house. Now, the watch house, of course, wasn't there at the time. That watch house wasn't built there till 1902. And the second hole went out towards the beach out there. And then the third one went down onto the hill at Beaumore. Now, an interesting point on the hill at Beaumore, in connection with the Connacht Rangers, we discovered. There's a hill there beside it, and they call it Peter's Hill. But it wasn't P-T-E-R, it was P-I-E-T-E-R. And it came from the Connacht Rangers who had fought in the Boer War. And that fought in Natal in South Africa. And the valley beside it, running up to the 17th green, they called that the Tequila. But Peter's Hill in the Tal was beside the Tequila River, and this is where it came from.
Okay.
Now, you want any more on that?
No, I mean, I think probably my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, so in 1907, the course was extended to 18 holes by Colonel Campbell's brother James.
That's correct.
Sorry, beg your pardon. By
William.
Colonel Campbell's brother William.
William, that's correct.
And that was designed in a clockwise routing, yeah?
A clockwise, yeah. Mm-hmm. He kept the first 4 holes here on the section. He went out to the 4th. And then the 5th hole headed down to the back of our 16th green, currently our 16th green. Mm-hmm. The holes cut from there right over to where the tees are at the 15th green. There's a little valley in front of the 15th tee. The 6th hole was there. The 7th hole then crossed over the stream over onto which is now the 8th fairway. They went from there up to the 9th, up to nowhere, opposite on the fairway, just below, in front of the 9th tee. Then the 12th and 13th holes, which today are still being played, they were designed by Colonel Campbell.
Okay.
They're Campbell holes. Now, they'll be extensively changed, particularly the 12th. The tee is extended away back, and there's a new green being built there. The new green was built in 1995.
Okay.
The 13th hole, there's been changes there with bunkers and that, and move the tee back further. But there were 2 Campbell holes. He came back from there then back to where the 6th green is now. And there's 2 holes from there, and then the old green there's an old green at the 5th, under the 5th tee. It's still there. You can see it, actually, the shape of it. And then they came back up onto the top of the hill here, and one went up to near the 2nd hole now. The next hole came down, and then there was 3 holes there, where the cottages, of course, were in there at the time, crossing over where the first fairway is now. The 4th hole, interestingly, that still exists to a certain extent. In 2019, when the club was 75 years old, or 125 years old, Padraig and myself went out and found the old tee on top of what we call Peter's Hill, and we cut the old tee. And the hole was played across the valley to the present 4th green, or just short of the 4th green. Okay. In front, on the left-hand side of the 4th green, there's an old grass bunker. Mm-hmm. That was part of the original course. Okay. And the green was beside it. Okay. Now, it was a very short hole. We were surprised how short it was. Okay. And it's not until you play it. And it was we would say it was an easy par 4. But then we must remember...
Hickory.
What equipment
Hickory and totally good approach, and maybe the odd Haskell as well, at a later stage, yeah?
Colonel Willie Campbell was the first international golfer to play out of here. Uh-huh. He played for us in 1906.
Okay.
And I'll tell you an interesting thing, and it came actually from Brendan Cashel, who has written a wonderful book on the West of Ireland Golf Championship. And we were here in 2017, and we always played a biennial match with Portmarnock. And we were saying that it was the 50th year of playing the match against Portmarnock. Mm-hmm. And Brendan said, "You're incorrect." He said, "The first match between Portmarnock and Ross's Point was played in 1907.
Wow.
And on the day that they played here in 1907, they opened the new 9 holes designed by Willie Campbell. Mm-hmm. And on that same day, Colonel Campbell presented a cup to the club here called the Hermitage Cup. Mm-hmm. In 1907. It was played twice a year from then on, but it's still played at the moment. And people often say to me, "Why was it called the Hermitage Cup?" And the answer was simple. That was the name of his house. And he and Arthur Jackson Sr. and his nephew, Campbell Perry, they were the 3 men who really started and drove this place. Uh-huh. How much golf the 3 of them played, we don't know. We don't think they were great golfers. But I think it was something they wanted to push at the time. A thing of interest, what I've often noticed, is that Arthur Jackson was a very far-seeing man. He actually had ladies members from the first day. And we have a cup there. It's from 1904, the Jackson Cup for ladies. And we feel it's one of the first cups for an open ladies competition in Ireland. It's a beautiful cup. Yeah. But he himself wasn't a great golfer, but it gives you an indication of how he wanted the ladies to play. And an interesting point, the first lady captain here in 1925 was his daughter, Olive Jackson. And his family had a huge connection. His son, Arthur Jr., he started the West of Ireland, which is in Brenda's book.
Of course. Well, that was obviously 1923, if I'm right.
23.
But before we get on to that, just a little something on William Campbell, obviously, that you mentioned just a minute ago. Needless to say, ironically, a Royal Dublin connection also.
He had, yeah.
Insofar as he was captain in 1914, Royal Dublin.
Correct.
Immediately before the outbreak of World War I.
Yeah.
And actually the 12th hole, the par 3 in Royal Dublin, is called after him. And I believe that he was somewhat responsible for the design of that hole.
Oh, that's very interesting.
There you go.
And I'll tell you the interesting point about that is that he was a barrister, Willie Campbell.
Yeah. Trinity educated.
That's right.
University, yeah.
But we get the impression that he was at college with Harry Colt.
Okay.
In I can't remember now where it was exactly.
Oxford?
But Oxford, that's right. And when they decided to extend the links here and bring Colt in the Cawthry was actually appointed originally. But Cawthry couldn't come here at the time. And they decided they would look elsewhere. Harry Colt was working in Royal Portrush at the time. And there was some complications happened in Portrush. And Willie Campbell decided to go to Portrush to see what Corrie Colt came here. Mm-hmm. And Colt came here because he hadn't at work at the time. And the interesting thing is the fee that was agreed with Cawthry was 50 guineas and they agreed a fee of 40 guineas with Colt.
That's, of course, Martin's Martin's granddad, yeah?
That's right.
So Martin's the existing one. Before, so is it Fred or is it the other one?
It was Fred Cawthry was the father. Yeah. Martin was the grandson.
Yeah,
that's right. But he that was 1927. Now Colt went the opposite way. These all holds now are all hold
anti-clockwise, yeah.
Anti-clockwise, and he had a habit, Colt, of shooting one side. We went out as far as the 6th, and suddenly we shoot to the 7th. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of changes, I remember being on the 7th hole 20 years ago when I was captain here with Martin Cawthry, and he pointed to the left-hand side, the right-hand side. He said, Harry Colt, he said, never put the bunker there. He said, on that course there. He says, they were on the left-hand side. And I said, they were. There was 3 bunkers there, but there was only one of them left at the time. So there was a lot of the little changes like that. And there was 2 bunkers at the 8th hole. You see on the 8th hole, there's a little hill. There was 2 like spectacle bunkers in that. And of course, the reason they were taken out was when the courses was designed, the members couldn't reach it. Okay. But as time moves on, they could reach it easily.
But my understanding, if I'm correct, Tony, Colt obviously designed the routing, and did Charles Allison come back to bunker it? Yeah.
Charles Allison designed the bunkers because I believe sometime after Colt finished, he had to go back to Portmarnock, so he didn't get shined. Charles Allison came here, and he designed the bunkers. Okay, that's what we reckon.
But I believe at the time, from a time perspective, it was often common. I know MacKenzie did it in Royal. Beg your pardon. MacKenzie, when he was in Sydney, designing New South Wales, when he did the routing, first of all, in 26, he basically just did the routing, okay, and said, "There's the green. This is where the fairway should go." And he didn't see any of the holes essentially built.
Yeah.
But basically suggested, look, hang on, don't bunker it now. So give it a couple of years and just put bunkers where people put their tee shots. So it was actually commonplace, if you like, to have the design and the routing done, get it built, and then do the bunkering afterwards.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that's what we reckon here.
Yeah.
The one thing that we have not been able to verify, and there's a small piece in the minutes. There was some complications at the 17th
Okay.
when they were designing it, and we haven't been able to find out what it was. It was mentioned in it in the minutes, but there was no reference to actually what it was.
Yeah.
And we, as I said, we would love to know what the problem was.
But interestingly, having seen your recent proposal that the members approved from MacKenzie and Ebert,
that's right.
There's a mention of the left-hand side of the 17th, that the depression there, and they're suggesting a recontouring. Whatever is on the left-hand side of the green side on 17. They suggested was seen to be done pretty quickly. So if that may have something to do with the problem that they had on the 17th.
It more than likely was, yeah. And as you can appreciate, at the time, there wasn't the equipment,
of course,
the machinery. And as I said earlier on, that most of the work in the early days was carried out by Colonel Campbell's some of his workmen.
Okay.
Now, that wouldn't have happened in 1928 because Colonel Campbell died in 1924.
Yeah. My understanding, obviously, in terms of Royal Portrush, the contractor for that was Colt's preferred contractor, a company called Franks Harris Brothers.
Yeah.
I was speaking to David Dunne towards the end of last week, and he thought that Franks Harris may have been involved from a contracting perspective in setting the golf course, the Colt course out. Is there any truth, or do you know anything about that?
No, that's something I don't know about.
Okay.
As I said, again, unfortunately, because of the minutes, and a lot of the minutes were vague, and a lot of the minutes are missing.
Okay.
And we have been looking, because several people have asked me from time to time, various things, actually Brendan Cashel in particular, and I couldn't find the minute books.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pity, because it was during the club renovations, and that little thing I gave to you there was taken out of the skip over here. Okay. And that's a lot of other information.
Well, whoever took that out did the club some service. But it would be lovely, and to be fair, I understand you've got a couple of original Colt routing plans.
We have
one in the bar here, and David has one as well, I believe.
There's a couple in there.
Okay, right
there.
Well, I must take some pictures of that.
You can.
And put
no
them
problem.
And put them up if that's okay.
The day that Martin Hawtrey was here, in the afternoon, Martin spent the whole
Martin Ebert, yeah.
Yeah, this is Martin Hawtrey.
Hawtrey, beg your pardon.
This isn't back in 2001.
Okay.
Martin Hawtrey spent the whole afternoon looking at those drawings of Colts. He was very interested in Colt himself and how he designed things and all that. And as I said, we're lucky that we have those drawings.
Yeah.
It's great that we have them.
And just apropos the Colt heritage, Tony, how important do you think that is to the identity of the golf club?
It's extremely important, and it's become more important in recent years because people seem to be going back to these designers, who they were and what they were. Yeah. And whilst a lot of them, they learned a lot of the design and that work from playing golf themselves. And as you know, Colt was secretary for many years in
Sunningdale,
in England.
Sunningdale,
and I'd say it's quite an important thing to have it, but there is a society, the Colt Society.
There is.
And I don't know whether they're still in operation or not.
Obviously they were based in Stoke Park or Stoke Poges, as it used to be.
Stoke Poges.
Interestingly, as an aside, Charles Allison, before he became a partner of Colt, was secretary of Stoke Poges.
Yeah.
And actually before that, he was secretary in Fox Rock in Dublin, would you believe?
Yeah.
But I suppose apropos the point about returning to the Golden Age principles, for a long time, post-Second World War, all of those designers like Colt and Fowler and Tom Simpson, and even the American designers, and obviously MacKenzie as well, the American guys like Tillinghast and Phones, etc., the Charles Blair MacDonald and Seth Rayner, they were all starting to die, if you like.
Yeah.
And the new boom after the Second World War and the boom of the American post World War II economy, it was very much sort of, what's the next big thing? The 20s was only 20 years ago, and they had the Depression in between, and they just wanted to forget about those times. And everything American was bigger, longer, faster, flashier. And I suppose when we think back on history, very much for the last week while, you could make an argument that European golf design was there was a lag of 20 years or so from maybe a fashion perspective or a trend perspective. And I guess ever since Sand Hills in Nebraska, which Bill Coore and Ben Crenshaw did in the mid 90s, there has been that movement back towards, I guess, back to the future, if you like, in terms of strategic golf design, interest, playability, and that whole notion of a championship test has kind of changed a little bit.
It has.
It's more of a setup thing than actually bunker the shit out of it. Excuse my French. So I guess I'm trying so the great Bernard Darwin described Harry Colt's work at the Dunluce course as a monument more enduring than brass. Okay, it's a quote from Horace, the Greek philosopher, and very much, this is I've been fortunate enough to visit County Sligo on a number of occasions, and this is probably my 4th or 5th time playing it today. Really looking forward to it. But for me, Ross's point is one of the monuments of Irish links golf. It's a championship venue, and just, how lucky are myself and Niall to be here today to share some time with you, but also to be, in a place that's so important, in terms of developing the game of golf in Connacht, and also, farther afield in Ireland. We forget how small the golf space was back in the late 1880s or early 1890s, and the cross-pollination that there was across the board, be it Anthony Brutus Babington across Royal Dublin and Beaver Park and Portrush and Royal Belfast and et cetera, et cetera. So it's no wonder that there's a link into Willie Campbell and Royal Dublin.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, obviously we mentioned that 1923 was the first staging in the west of Ireland. What do you know about what precipitated the creation and the setting up and the founding of the competition?
I think at the time that this was mainly through Arthur Jackson. Okay. Arthur Jackson Jr.
Yep.
Because he was quite a competent golfer himself. He was a very good swimmer, a very good sportsman, a very heavy man, and unfortunately it caused his demise. But he was interested in, and they were at the time they were beginning to develop the Connacht branch. There was no Connacht branch at the time. Okay. And he started the championship here, run by the club. And the following year, the Connacht branch was formed. And because of his connection with the golf here, he was made vice president of the Connacht branch on his inauguration in 1924. And to mark that occasion, he presented a cup, another Jackson's Cup for men. And it was open to all clubs in Connacht, and still is to this day. It's the major match play competition in this club. And an interesting thing to add to that on it is that next month, hopefully, his daughter is still alive in Belfast. She's 93 years of age, and she still drives her own car, and she's very much involved. She's 45 years working for the RNLI. And I wrote to her before Easter there. I met her some time ago to come here, and we presented her with the book. So she said she probably would. And I'm hoping that she does. It is the one connection we have with the past. And as I said, she's been here a couple of times and had photographs taken with her father's cup and her grandfather's cup. But that's the one connection we have. But no, I think myself that that was actually the origination of the competition. And I don't know whether you've been through Brendan's book or not.
I haven't seen it yet.
No, it's a fabulous book. And
is it for sale in the pro shop?
The amount of work that Brendan has done on that.
You would mention that he's nothing. I've certainly seen his history of Portmarnock Golf Club he published. Was it last year or the year before?
That's right.
No stone was left unturned with that book, so I can imagine how all-encompassing the book on the West of Ireland Championship is.
Oh, it is, yeah. And I myself personally have learned a lot from it. I did a lot of work with Brendan when he was, he recognises that in the book as well, when he was writing the book. But when I saw the production at the finish,
Yeah.
it's a fabulous book.
You were-
and it's a great thing for this club.
You were happy, and the members were happy, and it's
All the members were happy,
yeah.
very happy with it. And one of the things that it does, and it's one of the things this course doesn't get credit for, is the views that you can get from this course. And the one thing in most of the photographs that stands out, and I suppose it's the most iconic part of Sligo, is Ben Bulben Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
To see it down at the 10th and see it in the background.
Yeah.
And it's great to see it. The other place that we have...
Do you think we'll see it today? It's a bit foggy.
You may not see it today, and I don't like the way the forecast is going.
Okay.
The other place you get a lot of views is from the top of the second hole, right across. You get five counties from it.
Niall's not played here before. You're giving away all the secrets. He now knows where the second reveal is.
But there's great. The one thing about this course, which is, you see everything in front of you. You see it as it is. There's nothing round the corners.
Yeah.
There's no blind shots, no blind holes. The only hole that there is slightly blind is the 18th.
Okay.
And the 18th hole is called Christie's Farm.
Okay.
The reason it's called Christie's Farm is because you're hitting your tee shot across the gully, which we knew as a tequila. And this old guy, Christy Bellew, could not get across it.
Okay.
So he used to hit his tee shot across the 17th green, the back of it, to play up the hill. So there was another place on the left-hand side of it we cut, and that was known as Toomey's Garden.
Okay.
And Des Toomey was another player. He couldn't reach it, so he had to play into this and then play up. Of course, they had the shots, but it was... that's where they got the name.
Yeah. In terms of just going back to the west of Ireland, I mean, I just was looking through the notable winners and moving backwards from both County Sligo and Royal Dublin. You loaned them to us. Barry Anderson obviously was a winner quite recently. Great celebrations not only in Dollymount but also in Ross's Point, and well deserved. Barry's a class act. People will obviously be aware of the names of Shane Lowry, Rory McIlroy, who actually defended as a 16-year-old, I believe, in 05 and 06. Going back a little bit farther, Padraig Harrington in 1994. Not to mention for all those people, the non-Irish out there, Harry Diamond, Rory's caddy, was West of Ireland champion in 2012. He was some golfer and is some golfer in his own right. He people don't maybe quite understand how good he is and how good he was. And then getting into the meat of it, I mean, obviously John Burke, who would be of the parish of Lahinch, won 6 times.
Yeah.
the great JB Carr, who I think in total won 28 or 29 senior amateur championships, including multiple. Obviously the West of Ireland Championship 9 times, and then your own Cecil Ewing, who was a 10-time champion. What can you tell us about some of those gentlemen? I mean, particularly we maybe not forget about the most recents, but the likes of John Burke and JB Carr and Cecil. I mean, they are, back in those days. I guess people may not realise how much more important the amateur game was when compared with the pro game.
Amateur game was very, very big. And actually, sadly, here in Sligo, in the West of Ireland Championship, never got the credit that was deserved to it. The people that we got credit from was actually the people who came here. And we have a cup there in the cabinet, the Visitors' Cup. It's this claret jug there. You can probably see it beside me.
Yeah.
And that was given to the club in 1945 by Pierce Purcell and Arthur Hamilton. And they collected quite a lot of money for that. And for the first prize, they gave a silver salver, which was won by Jerry Owens. And the rest of the money then was for the competition during the year. But it was a thank you to the people of the club for the way they were entertained over the weekend, because it was a weekend's golf at the time.
Yeah.
Because not only was the West of Ireland played, on the Sunday they played for the O'Connor Cup, and sometimes on the Monday then they played for the Connacht Bar Cup. But in latter times then it became the Visitors' Cup they played for. But Cecil Ewing was our own. He was born and reared in the village here. Very big man, tall man, very fine golfer. And his swing was, I suppose, was what most people thought was very strange. He had a very short backswing. He only went to there. But when he was...
John Ram-esque.
Yeah. When he was young, seemingly he had problems with his toes.
Okay.
And he found that he had an open swing at the time, that he found that it was hindering him, this toe. So he decided this stance, where he stand with his feet very close together, and he'd only go to there. But the one thing I always remember about Cecil Ewing is, even in the wind, he could place the ball on the right-hand side or the left-hand side of the fairway. He was very good at it. What I saw it really was one year at the 15th hole, we had a little bit of flooding on the left-hand side, and Cecil was well up the right-hand side, well clear of the water.
Okay.
He could place the ball. He was a very, very good golfer, and he used to hit the ball very, very low, and it'd just rise.
Okay.
But he was a great man to play into the wind.
Okay. And
he and Carr were rivals here for years. Burke, I don't remember. Unfortunately, Burke was before my time.
Okay.
And even though I saw the first West of Ireland, I suppose, was about 1948. But Burke was before that time. Okay. And he came here quite a lot, and you probably know all the stories about Burke.
Well, I do, but maybe some of the listeners don't. So maybe you can tell me the story about John Burke and the Walker Cup, perhaps. I believe he represented Great Britain and Ireland once, and once only.
He did. But the only thing the only story that I remember on Joe Burke being told here was putting his tee shot down at the 18th hole. And he was watching his opponents and to see what he was doing. They were watching him. And he took out a 3-iron, seemingly, and he put it on the green from there and went on to win. Okay. I can't remember who it was now, but that's the only story I heard about John Burke. But I'd hear the older guys talk.
My understanding that John Burke may have had Republican tendencies.
He had.
Yes.
From what I gather.
Correct. And he would have my understanding is he also represented Great Britain and Ireland in the Walker Cup only once.
Yes,
because the RNA were unaware of his Republican tendencies.
Yeah.
When they found out, he wasn't selected anymore. And also, another wee story, obviously MacKenzie would have revised the Lahinch golf course down in Lahinch. Yeah. And I believe Burke didn't like some of the hills and hummocks that MacKenzie put in the MacKenzie greens. So he flattened them. Which is unfortunate because I also don't believe that Lahinch have any pictures of the MacKenzie greens from that mid-1920s perspective. So presumably you would have seen J.B. Carr as well then, so?
I've seen J.B. Carr a lot.
Yeah.
I always remember with J.B. Carr, and I was only very young at the time, was his putting was not good at the time. And he decided to use a 3-iron. And I remember watching him that day use the 3-iron to very great effect.
Wow. So the additional loft of the 3-iron was better for his putting stroke than perhaps the 2 or 3 degrees. Yeah. I guess maybe just going, but before we finish up, Tony, and thank you very much for your time. I'm wondering, as Colt progressed in age, Alison would of course have gone off to the States and to Japan.
Yeah.
Colt stopped traveling, probably sort of before World War II. And would have passed over the travel element of the design practice, so anywhere outside England, to his other partner, John Morrison, at the time.
Yeah.
Are you aware of any involvement that Morrison had here?
No, I'm aware of none. Morrison's name was never mentioned, but I knew of the club. That's why I give you that. The 3 names are on that. And I don't think at any stage that Morrison was here.
Okay.
And unfortunately, see, again, it goes back when we start looking for minutes. There's nothing in it, even though a lot of the minutes are very vague.
Okay.
Now, it's a pity that when you're here, I found a piece last night of taken from one of the minute books some time ago in connection with the 17th and the remarks about Colt. But there's nothing, we'll say, major in it.
Specific,
it's just what they mentioned about having the
general terms. So obviously after World War II or what we in Ireland here call the emergency.
Emergency, that.
There probably wasn't a hell of a lot happening in relation to course revisions or anything like that. It wasn't really until the 1960s that Eddie Hackett got a little bit of momentum. And was anybody like Hackett or I mean, obviously we know that Pat Ridley was involved here sort of in later days. From a course design perspective, was there anybody else involved in relation to overseeing the course or making suggestions as to improvements that might be considered? There
was several people came along. From time to time, We got people writing in, agronomists writing in, course designers writing in. And in fact, here in 2001, we had a number of submissions. And at that stage, we decided to bring in Martin Hawtrey.
Okay.
That was to negate what was happening.
Okay.
There were a lot of people, say, from time to time over the years. Some of the members here tried different things, and
how did that work out?
It didn't. It was only a minor effect. That they wanted to change the second one time, and because certain people couldn't get up the hill,
okay,
and it changed the green. But the general membership always put a block on that. They were very proud of the fact that the
good sense prevailed.
Good sense prevailed.
Okay.
Even when we built Beaumore here, we had an ex-captain who wrote to the club here, telling it would be a white elephant, and how he proposed to make a different design of the course, which would mean altering the whole course. And I met him, and we had quite an argument over it. But I said it was the difference between his opinion and the club opinion. And we, at the time, went ahead and built Beaumore, which has been a great success.
And that's obviously your additional 9-hole golf course. What architect was involved with you for that?
The architect was, he was Tucker. I can't think of his first name. He was from STRI.
Okay.
And he designed the 9 holes. Previous to that, I believe that Eddie Hackett had designed 9 holes on Beaumore.
Okay.
But it never materialised. Okay. I don't know what happened. You hear it mightn't be even true, but I've been told that.
Okay.
But can't think of the man. Oh yes, I can't think of his first name. But he was the man who designed. They were the course agronomists here for us at the time.
Okay.
So we got him over, and he designed the 9 holes on Beaumore.
Okay.
And it has been, as I say, a great success. There's a lot of people who have never played golf only for Beaumore, and we're quite happy with it as a 9-hole course. It has really matured over the years since we started it. There's 3 of the holes there as good as any hole on the championship
and it's
course.
Probably slightly more manageable in that it's kind of your traditional lowland plain, if you like, that it's laid out over.
Well, one of the great things about Beaumore is for elderly men like myself, it's level,
and women surely,
and the ladies the same. And we can walk from there, and there's a toilet beside it.
Okay.
And it's all within walkable distance. And that has been the big success of Beaumore. The other one that has made a difference here in the late 80s, early 90s, we had the junior golf. They were always looking for time on a Saturday morning. It's the only time the children were off school. And of course, members did not want that. And once with the addition of Beaumore, they could go to Beaumore. It solved that problem. And since that time, we've had a very, very good junior golf.
That's brilliant.
Good program.
But like it's funny, that additional facility, whether it's a shorter course, it's more manageable, it's friendlier, it's kind of more, I guess, from a starting perspective, but also the other end of the spectrum.
That's right.
When the big course is a little bit too big, it actually fulfills a number of different roles and routes to the game, or routes away from the game, if you like.
Just thought of the man's name that designed it. It was Jonathan Tucker.
Okay.
Jonathan Tucker, that was the man's name.
Well, Tony, thank you very much for sharing your insight. As I said, we'll take a look at the drawing inside, and obviously you said David has a slightly different map as well that he might be able to show me.
Yeah.
Listen, you're a gentleman. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Just before we sign off, I have a wee little favour to ask. If you're enjoying the show, it would be great if you could give it a star rating and maybe even a written review on your particular podcast platform of choice. It really makes a difference and would be very much appreciated. Many thanks for considering the request. Until the next time, happy golfing.